What is beeping now? Oh my gosh, okay. I have my notes, my coffee, which is now half empty because it's taken me so long to get set up, but that's okay. We're ready to go. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Angela Braniff, and I had kind of a fun idea for a little series to do here. So if you guys watch my vlog channel, then I told some kind of funny stories over there the other day. It was just kind of a random conversation that I was having in the kitchen with my husband about previous jobs I used to have and some weird things that happened at those jobs, like weird jobs, period, but then just like weird things that happened at those jobs that were just funny things, you know? And in the comments of that video, a bunch of people were like, you should tell more of these stories and, you know, just sort of tell us more about these things. I've also been asked a bunch to tell the birth stories for my older girls because we've made videos for pretty much all of our adoption stories. And I've not done like birth stories for my older daughters who are 13 and 11, my biological girls. I posted on Instagram, and if you're not following me over there, you should be. It's just This Gathered Nest. I'll leave it linked down below. But I sort of asked over there and left a question box, like, what kind of things would you guys want me to talk about if I did this series? Based on some of those messages that I got and stuff through this series, we're going to talk about things like ex-boyfriends. I've got some funny stories about ex-boyfriends, ex-job things that I used to do. I got a lot of questions. We're going to talk a little bit about like plastic surgery, Botox, fillers, what I've had done, what I would have done, what I think about all that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about that. I have a really funny story about a bounty hunter at Waffle House. Do you need to know more than that? It's a funny story. So today's video, though, is going to be the birth story of my oldest daughter, Kennedy, who is 13. And I really kind of actually wanted to do this video for her like 13th birthday. That did not end up happening. So y'all are just gonna have to bear with me. This sun is really being brutal right now, like shining and then going away and then shining and going away. Just bear with me. If it gets too bad, I'll fix it, but I'm gonna leave it for now because otherwise I'll just be messing with it the whole time. So I've not ever like really told her birth story. And so I do have a memoir book that I wrote that is coming out at the end of April, and it's available for pre-order now. And I do talk about being pregnant with her, and I talk about that journey a lot more in depth in the book. But what I touch on more in the book and what I'm talking about there is more of the hyperemesis journey of the pregnancy. So today's video is going to focus on her labor and delivery and her birth, because that's what I want to talk about is, and I didn't really talk much about it in the book other than to say sort of like, and she was born. So I want to give you like the birth story and have that sort of, you know, somewhere. I probably should have recorded this, I don't know, 13 years ago, because I'm certain I will forget details, but I hope that y'all will forgive me for that, and I think she will too. So I'm going to try to include photos along the way as I can. Remember, I'm an old lady here on YouTube, okay? And I joke around, say that, and people get annoyed sometimes, but comparatively speaking, compared to the average person you might be watching on YouTube, I'm kind of an old lady. I'm probably a good 10 years older than the people that you normally watch, or at least like other mom channel people. So the reason I tell you that is to tell you that she was born in 2007. So technology, social media, the kind of cameras and things that we had, like the phone cameras, were terrible. So I don't have, it's not like I have a bunch of video footage and stuff, and I will share what I have is what I'm saying. What I've got to show you, I'll show you. As per my usual, I've done a lot of talking before we've actually gotten into this, but I wanted to explain the new series, and I'm excited about these Untold Angie stories. I should have like a creepy intro that's like Unsolved Mysteries, but like Untold Stories. Maybe you already saw that. Maybe I was creative and came up with one and you've already seen it. You've already saw it. Okay, so I wrote down notes because I knew that I would get to blabbing and forget. So like I said, I'm not going to go into the whole hyperemesis and that whole story here because that would make this video way too long. So you can read my book if you want to know more about that, but eventually I will do a video sort of all about hyperemesis and I've been pregnant 3 times and I've had it every time. So I'm not going to talk about that much more than just to tell you that basically I was very, very sick for most of my pregnancy. I was a sickly pregnant woman and never really was healthy or able to work during my pregnancy or anything like that. I kind of laid around with my dog. We had, when I was pregnant with her and I left my job and, you know, things were just kind of going downhill. I found an advertisement in the paper for these little long-haired blonde dachshunds. And what I didn't know is that I drove to the boonies to get this dog, and what I didn't know is that she was inbred. So she was absolutely beautiful, just the sweetest dog, dumb as a box of rocks, and ended up having a lot of problems later. But point is that I treated this dog like a baby. Like basically, she and I slept in a recliner and snuggled. If I wasn't at the doctor, I was at the house watching TLC's A Birth Story or A Baby Story, or as Ash and I, my sister, like to call it, When Babies Attack, because those shows were always like everything was just imminent danger at all times. And so I was always watching those shows, not good, probably a good idea for a pregnant lady, and snuggling this dog. So that was pretty much my existence during that pregnancy. I'd been so sick, I'd lost a lot of weight, like probably close to 30 pounds. And towards like the middle part of my pregnancy, so like 28 weeks to 30 weeks, they really started to suspect that Kennedy might have something called IUGR, which is intrauterine growth restriction. She was always measuring very small. I lost a lot of weight and I wasn't really gaining any weight at all. And so she was always measuring right at like that 10, 11th percentile. And so that's the cutoff. It's if a baby's measuring less than 10%, at least it was at the time. I can't speak to anything current with, that sort of stuff, medically speaking. This is the way it was at the time. And so she was always on the cusp of that, where they were worried there might be some kind of growth restriction. Because she was always on that like 11% line for her size, meaning that, she was in the 11th percentile. So then we're watching that really closely. And when I was around 30 weeks, I don't remember exactly how many weeks pregnant I was. I could do the math, but I'm not gonna, because I don't think it matters that much for this. So we went down to Georgia. My Uncle Buddy had passed away, and he was my dad's uncle, but I called him Uncle Buddy. And he was a very special person in my life. There was no way I was going to miss this man's funeral and an opportunity to pay my respects to him. And so I hauled my cookies. My parents took me with them. They were going down to the funeral with my little sister, and so I went with them. In an effort not to make the front half of this video massive before we actually get to her labor and delivery, if you want more of the details of all of this and everything that happened, that's all in my book. But ended up dealing with a lot of pain while I was there, not really sure what was wrong. And on the way home, the pain sort of came to a head, and it was excruciating. And I went to the urgent care, I went to the hospital, and they ended up finding out that I had kidney stones. And they suspected that they might be too large to pass. But when you have a kidney stone, typically they would just like for it to pass on its own, and they measure it through ultrasound and try to determine if it's something you can pass. And a lot of times they'll do something called lithotripsy to break it up. But because I was pregnant, you can't just go shaking up a pregnant lady. So they couldn't do that. So they were like, okay, we're going to place a stent. So they put me under full anesthesia at the hospital and placed this stent, which essentially clears and makes room. Do you like these like graphic, hand motions to try to explain to you? They're opening it up and making room for the kidney stone to come out. If they opened it up that much, a whole baby could come out. But then they try to clear the way for the kidney stone to pass, essentially. Again, there's lots of funny little things that happened with that, and I do talk about that in my book. I promise this is not meant to be like an advertisement for my book. I just want you to know that if you want to know more about that stuff, it's in there. But I don't want to go into all of that here. Otherwise, this will be like an hour-long video, which it might already be anyways. So after that procedure, and there was concern. There was obviously concern that putting a pregnant woman under and all of this, the pain and everything can irritate your uterus, cause contractions. There's just all these things that you're really not supposed to experience while you are pregnant. So I do remember that after the procedure, I was having contractions, and they really wanted to check to make sure that they weren't doing anything. I believe I was around 31 weeks at this time, and they wanted to make sure that it wasn't inadvertently sending me into preterm labor because of this, uterine irritation. My dad and my mom were both there, and I had this doctor, okay? He just had no bedside manner. Some doctors are just, there's a high level of intelligence, and sometimes with that, you can also lose interpersonal skills, okay? We've all met doctors like that. They're really good at what they do, but they're kind of dumb when it comes to like personal relations. This was this doctor. He was just kind of like very abrasive and made me feel there was no like comfort and whatever. So he's like, okay, well, let me do a cervical check to see if there's anything going on. So he comes over and my dad's like, I'm going to, excuse myself into the hallway because this guy's about to lift up the blanket and go up my skirt. And he looks at my dad and he says, why are you going to leave now? You were there when it happened. Like, as in he was the one who like impregnated me kind of a thing. Like, you've already seen this. Why are you leaving now? And my dad was like, excuse me, I was not. I'm her father. And it was so funny. My dad was so like annoyed and irritated. And the doctor it wasn't even like he felt embarrassed or anything. He was just like, oh, sorry. And it's only funny because this happened all the time when I was a teenager and in my early 20s before Sierra and I got married. People would always think that my dad was my boyfriend when he would take me places because he would take me, we'd go do a lot of different things together. Anywhere we would go or meet people, especially like any of the like outdoorsmen, sporting goods type places, the men would always think that I was his girlfriend. And it would make him so mad. He would get so irritated. I have so many stories about that. Maybe we could do a whole video about all the times people thought I was dating my dad. That's a good title. And I think I was like a centimeter or maybe 2 dilated. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make them realize that perhaps there was something, going on here and we should be very careful. So they decided they didn't want to risk it because I was 31 weeks. They decided to give me a steroid shot for Kennedy's lungs. So they give you those steroid shots, one, and then 24 hours later you get another. At least this is how it was at the time when I was pregnant with Kennedy in 2007. Which I won't even go into that was seriously, it's all about the placement. If you're a nurse giving those shots, it's all about the placement, man. I tell you what, the first nurse, she put that thing like right in my butt crack, like not to the side, not in the muscle. It was like she went too far in and into the crack. And it hurt so bad. I wanted to crawl out of my skin. And at that point, I'd had a lot of painful things happen during that pregnancy. So the fact that first steroid shot hurt so bad, oh my gosh, I can still just like, ugh, it makes my stomach hurt to think about it. And so the one I had to have 24 hours later, as you might imagine, I had worked myself up to a high level of anxiety. And the nurse who gave that one gave it in a different spot, a meteor spot, if you will. And it didn't hurt nearly as bad. And that really just made me want to find that first nurse and punch her. So if you're a nurse out there giving people shots in the butt, placement is very important. So, they gave me those steroid shots for her lungs just to make sure that, if she did come early, that things would, hopefully be okay, or at least it would help, right? Unfortunately, after having the stent placed, it did not clear the kidney stones. They were too big to pass, as they'd kind of suspected that. I'm trying to remember all the details. They'd kind of suspected that, but there was just, they weren't sure, so they figured, let's try this. The stent wasn't doing anything. I wasn't passing the stones, and I was just in a lot of pain. And, they try not to have pregnant women on high doses of pain medication and stuff like that. So it's just all around, we needed to try to solve this problem. So a few weeks later, I went in and they decided to place a nephrostomy tube. And so that is like a tube that they place. It goes in through your sort of side back area and directly into your kidney. They sew it to your skin to like hold it in place. And then it drains into a bag that you just carry around like a purse. And it's essentially just like this bag of pee that you carry around. It drains your kidneys while the rest of the process just isn't working because it's blocked by a stone. So I had this nephrostomy tube placed. I talk again more about that in the book, the actual procedure. That one they did under twilight sedation because they didn't want to risk the problems we had last time with irritation and contracting. So they decided to do twilight sedation, which I don't know if I'm somebody that twilight sedation doesn't work for, or if that's what twilight sedation is supposed to be. But I'm just going to tell you, if you ever have to have it, like, ask questions, think twice about it, because I don't know what kind of sedation that was, but I felt everything and it was not fun at all. Just laying on a table while somebody punctures your back and sticks something into your kidney and then sews it to your skin. Oh, one of the least fun experiences of my life for sure. And then after the nephrostomy tube was placed, I basically just carried around this bag all the time. And I say carried around, I wasn't really going anywhere at all. I was pretty much at home, but I had this bag that had to be drained. But I do remember, I wish Sierra was here to tell you about this part, because this is one of his favorite little anecdotal stories, is that one evening we went to Target. I just wanted to get out. So a bunch of us, a handful of us, 4 or 5 of us went to Target, and CR was pushing me in a wheelchair because, we were trying to keep me from going into early labor at this point. We were trying to keep my uterus like calm down. And I also had this bag, so we were trying to kind of hang that. And I was, completely sort of emaciated and just, didn't have any strength or energy. So he's pushing me in a wheelchair. And I have no problem telling you that at this point, I was not mentally well. I was very, very anxious and cranky, and just really truly anything could set me off. And when you're married, unfortunately, sometimes the person that the people you love most take the brunt of that. But so he's pushing me through Target, and I'm irritated with him because, when people are trying to be funny, but you're just like not feeling it, and every little thing they do irritates you, right? So he's pushing me through Target. I don't know that I've mentioned this yet, but pretty much the entire pregnancy, I had to carry a spittoon, as they call it, basically a cup that I would spit into, because I also, with all of the hyperemesis and nausea and vomiting, I had something called tylism. And it sort of makes you over salivate, and that over salivating also makes you nauseous and throw up if you're just continuing to swallow that. So I carried around a cup that I would spit in all the time. So I have this bag of pee, this cup of spit. My husband's pushing me in this wheelchair. I'm like not the most pleasant person at this point. I feel like that's fair. And he was just irritating me. And he turns down an aisle, and I wanted some mints, the red and white Starlight mints is what they're called, because I would suck on those and it would help with my nausea and the tylism. So we're turned down this aisle, and I'm not, I'm sitting in a wheelchair, and the mints are at the top, the ones I want. And so I'm like, can you get me the mints? Can you give me the Starlight mints? And he's like, these? I'm like, no, not those. These? No. And to me, it was one of those things that, it was so obvious. I said, the Starlight mints, it's the same ones I get every time. It's the same. And he was just like not seeing them or something. I don't know. But I got so like pissed off at him that I was like, the Starlight mints, you imbecile. And as I'm like in this like fit of rage, I'm wheeling myself off down the aisle. So I'm like yelling at him, I said the Starlight mints, you imbecile, as I'm wheeling myself down the aisle. And it was one of those moments that he was like trying not to burst out laughing, because I probably would have like gone postal, but to him, it was like one of the funniest things that I was like so angry, and just the whole thing of wheeling down the aisle, yelling at him, calling him an imbecile in the middle of Target over mints. Definitely not my finest moment. I started basically at this point, they were doing biophysical profiles on Kennedy, trying to make sure that she was doing okay through all of this. And we just got to a place where I was 35 weeks in a number of days, and the nephrostomy tube was keeping things drained, but I was still having so much pain, and they weren't really sure. They were basically like, we need you to not be pregnant in order for us to be able to deal with the kidney issues. There was other things that were starting to happen in my lab work that weren't looking good. And everybody just felt, the doctors just felt that it was really getting to a point where her IUGR didn't look like it was getting any better. She was still very, very tiny, and I wasn't getting any better with kidney wise. And they really wanted to deliver her. So they wanted to make sure, though, that they weren't delivering her with a poor lung capacity and putting her at risk in that way. So they really wanted me to have an amniocentesis. Now, the thing I should add here is that if you haven't been able to tell through this entire story, I really had no idea like what I was doing, what was going on. I was young. I didn't really know how to advocate for myself in anything. I didn't know much about birth or pregnancy or, labor and delivery or anything, really, truly. And if you've seen my birth story for the twins, and when I do sit down to do my birth story for Shelby as well, you will see how this experience very much informed and changed how I handled my birth and birth experiences later. Because this was just one where I felt very, very out of control, and like nobody was really listening to me. And so they wanted me to have an amniocentesis. Don't know what that is. They take this big needle, they stick it into your belly. It goes right in through your belly into your uterus and draws out amniotic fluid. And then they test that amniotic fluid for whatever it is they want to test for. That's one reason for an amniocentesis. What they wanted to do is they can use that amniotic fluid to check her lung development. I don't know the science. I don't know what they're looking for, any of that, but it's a way that they can check for a baby's lung development, like where sort of if they feel like they're at a place where it's okay to deliver. And so they wanted me to do that. I went in and did that. Again, I talk about that experience more in my book, because it was another classic Angie moment. That evening they called me and said that, the results came back and that her lungs looked mature and they wanted to go ahead and deliver me. So to come back into the hospital that night and they would sort of get everything going for an induction. So I went back in that evening around 7 p.m. I think, and they started me on Cervidil. And Cervidil, they just place that into your cervix, and it's like a little tab almost kind of a thing, if I remember correctly. And really it's supposed to sort of act as this like beginning stage to like soften the cervix and get it ready to begin opening and all of that. So this was my first baby and I was early. Although I had been experiencing early labor stuff and preterm labor, so they figured that this would probably be a pretty successful induction. They weren't starting from scratch completely. I think like I said, it was 1 to 2 centimeters dilated. So they put in the Cervidil overnight. The next morning I woke up and I don't remember. It had done what they'd wanted it to do. It wasn't like I was 6 centimeters. I think I was maybe at that point like 2 to 3 or something. It really just sort of softened things and got them ready. So they started Pitocin that morning. And again, nobody really knew like what to expect, how long this was going to take. It was my first baby, but she was early and small, and so I just didn't really know what was going to happen from there. I don't really have a ton of memories of the next few hours. I just kind of remember being in this hospital room. They had like a TV with like a video game thing. Was he playing them or was I telling him he couldn't play them? I don't remember. I just remember being annoyed that they had a TV with video games because I felt like your freaking wife is having a baby and you need video games. I get very irritated about stuff like that. My parents were there. My grandma and grandpa were there. CR was there. And so we were all just kind of, on this baby watch waiting. But what I do remember is that I think I was maybe like 4 centimeters when contractions started to really hurt. And like I said, I was on Pitocin and I'd been pretty much in some kind of level of pain my entire pregnancy. And I hadn't, again, given much thought to a natural birth or any of that because of everything that was happening. I was just sort of at the whim of what was happening to me. I didn't feel like I could make a lot of choices. And the nurse came in and she was so sweet. And I remember her saying, like, if you're going to have an epidural and you are, just go ahead and get it. Like, don't, you've been through enough. Like, you don't need to put yourself through undue pain. You're in labor. Everything's looking good. Just get the epidural. So I was like, okay. So I think I was maybe 4 or 5 centimeters when they came in and gave me the epidural. I don't recall it being anything extraordinarily painful. I remember it was, of course, uncomfortable. I didn't really love it wasn't a wonderful experience. It didn't tickle. It wasn't horrible. And so they gave me that. And then I never really felt any more pain at all. Like at all. I don't know. It was just, I might as well have been sitting in the chair at the hair salon getting my hair colored or something. Like it was just kind of like I was there and this was all just happening. And so I was feeling really, just kind of tired and all of that. And so they said, why don't you take a little bit of a rest? I think at that point I was maybe 6 or so centimeters. They said, why don't you let your family go down to the cafeteria? They can all eat and you can take this time to just rest, close your eyes, get some sleep, all that kind of stuff. So we were all like, great, that sounds like a fabulous plan. It was around lunchtime. I want to say like 1-ish. And so CR, my grandparents, my mom, I don't remember if my dad was there yet at that point or not, but they all went down to the cafeteria to go get something to eat. And I tried to close my eyes and get a little bit of sleep. Well, I just remember, I don't know how long I was asleep for, if I ever actually slept at all, but all of a sudden it's like this, oh, great, I'm going to poop my pants. That's basically the feeling. Like, I feel like I'm going to poop my pants. So I call the nurse back in and she's like, oh yeah, like the baby is here, like this baby is coming. And then all of a sudden it's like whirlwind, right? So I'm calling CR and I'm telling him, you guys need to come back. Like, you need to come back from lunch. Like, I'm going to give birth to this baby. Get your butt back here. And I called my sister, who at the time was babysitting. Well, she was did in-home daycare for a friend of ours. This was one of my good friends from years ago. So they were going to come together. So she calls my friend Dara and says, come get Lily and Angie's in labor. Let's go. So she was, trying to get up to the hospital as fast as she could. But Miss Kennedy, man, she just didn't want to wait. So I think that maybe I pushed, 3 or 4 times. I really don't remember. First of all, nothing hurt. I felt nothing. And I pushed a couple of times. But he still gave me an episiotomy, like a little episiotomy, which we can talk about that later because the baby was like flying out and she weighed 5 pounds. I'm not sure why I needed an episiotomy, but he gave me a little episiotomy and then she just went, bloop, came flying out. And because she was 36 weeks and all these things, like they had, of course, just immediately taken her over to the little baby isolette area. It had to have been like less than 5 minutes after she was born. My sister walks in the door and she was so, Ashley still to this day, if you ask her about it, she gets irritated because she's so sad that she missed Kennedy's birth only by just a couple of minutes. But so they, whisked her away over there and were, checking her and making sure she was okay. And the other thing I forgot to mention, because apparently I'm a terrible storyteller, is that the doctor who was going to deliver Kennedy was the same doctor that I told you guys earlier had terrible bedside manner and said that my dad was the father of my baby. So I just was, at that point, I just didn't really care. I just wanted her to be born and, be healthy. And, I just didn't really care. But he definitely was it just was rubbed me wrong, right? Like I thought, of course I have this fool delivering my baby. However, I will say that after Kennedy was born, sort of in the labor process, but very much after she was born, his demeanor changed a lot. And I remember very specifically that once they had like sort of cleaned her up and wrapped her up, make sure everything that, she was okay and she didn't need to go to the NICU or anything like that for breathing, that, she checked out great. And, of course, she was very tiny, 5 pounds, 9 ounces. And they brought her over to me and she was already kind of bundled at that time. Again, this was before hospitals were very standard in doing, rooming in with your baby and skin to skin and stuff like that. This was a pop them out. They take them over there. They clean them all up. They wrap them up in blankets and they bring them back to you. At least how it was with the OBs. And so, they bring her back to me wrapped up and everything. And he asks, the whole time, he's stitching me up and taking care of the Queen Mother, as I like to call her. So they bring Kennedy back and hand her to me. And, we're just kind of talking and stuff. And he's like, I'd love to pray over her. Is that okay? And it was just sort of this weird like shift in his behavior that I was like, you see the humanity in someone that you haven't always been able to see the humanity in. So it was really a very precious moment after her birth that I didn't see coming and was much appreciated because, like I said, I had been so anxious and all of these things. And he said a very beautiful prayer. And it was just like this really sweet, tender moment after her birth that was very precious. And so unfortunately, though, pretty quickly after that, they said, okay, well, now that this was again before the time when you would stay in the same room, this was you'd labor one place and then they'd move you to another. After I had delivered her, they said, all right, we're going to take her to the newborn nursery and we're going to give her a bath and we're going to do her hearing screening. We got to do these things and then we'll bring her to you in your postpartum room. That'll give you time to move rooms. And I remember not liking that at all, not wanting to let her go. It's your newborn baby. I'm not even going to make excuses. It doesn't matter if my pregnancy had been traumatic or, all the difficulties. None of that matters. It's that it's your motherly instinct more than anything. I did not want them to take her, but I didn't feel like I had a choice. I didn't know what to say or do. So I was like, oh, okay. So they moved me rooms and I'd been in there for a good hour or so at that point, like between packing up and then moving and then also being in there for an hour. She'd been gone for a good while, more than 2 hours, certainly much longer than it takes to give a baby a bath and do a hearing test. And so I started kind of like asking nicely in my Angie people pleasing way, could I have my baby back, please? Like where's my baby? And I had to ask multiple times, and to the point that at this point I'm crying, I'm upset, I want my baby back. And CR kind of had to like intervene as well and say to the nurse, like, bring us our damn baby, like bring us the baby. And so they did eventually bring her back, but she'd been gone for a number of hours and a time that we should have been nursing and she should have been skin to skin. And instead she was in an isolette in the nursery. And when they brought her back, I remember I didn't know anything about nursing or latching or anything, but I knew there at the top of the isolette, there was stuck these little plastic packets of sugar water, the sucrose or whatever they call it, like the little sugar water packets that they use for babies for various reasons. So I was just like, well, why did you need to give her sugar water? What were you doing that you needed to do that? It just felt like maybe there was a good reason, but no one told me and no one asked me. And that's my problem. It's not about whether or not there was a good reason for it. It's about the fact that as her mother, no one asked me. And I do think that that is absolutely an issue with, oh boy, we're going to go here, I guess. But an issue, being a young mom and not being assertive as a person, as a personality trait at that point in my life. You kind of just get walked on. So anyways, there's a reason why I'm telling you that part of the story. But the point is they did eventually bring her back. And, but it was very difficult. My anxiety never really went down. But she was sweet and tiny and just this precious little thing. And Christopher and I were both terrified, like we are going to break her. She was so tiny, trying to change her diapers and everything and get her to nurse and latch. She was 36 weeks. She was really tiny. It was all challenging. But she was so cute, and she was pretty much totally bald, like a little bit of blonde fuzz. And she had these big blue eyes, like these big blue eyes. And she looked just like CR. Oh my gosh, she looked just like CR. So yeah, she was so sweet, just precious little thing. And the first night in the hospital, again, similar thing. I was just emotionally struggling a little bit. And the nurses were like, let us take her. You need to get some sleep. Let us take her. And, it's kind of like when someone who's in an authority place is telling you, like, I can see that you're tired. I want to help you. You want to, and they have good intentions. Their intentions are pure. They truly do just want to help you as this tired young mom. But it was like they took her and I just laid in the bed and cried. And finally, after a few hours, CR was like, just call the nurse and tell them to bring her back. Just tell them you want her back. Like they're not going to be mad at you. You're not in trouble. She's our baby. Like we can have her back if that's what you want. But I felt like, I don't know, I just felt like they're going to yell at me though if I'm holding her and my eyes are closed, or you know what I mean? Like you can't have the baby in the bed and you can't. It just all felt very much like I couldn't do what instinctually I wanted and needed to do with her. I was being told I couldn't. And so it was just it was difficult as a first-time mom and being only 22 and not really knowing but the nurse was sweet. And when I called her, like I said, it was probably 2 a.m. that I was just like, I can't, like, I need you to bring her back. And she was like, of course, absolutely. And brought her right back. So there was like no issue there. But yeah, it was a long couple of days in the hospital trying to sort of navigate those awkward situations. And with this baby that I didn't really know exactly what I was doing, but my instincts were trying to help me and tell me what to do. But I felt like I wasn't really being allowed to listen to them. So it was a little bit challenging there. But we did eventually get discharged and able to take her home. And at the time we were living with my parents. So Kennedy went home to my parents' house. And yes, it was very surreal bringing a baby home for the first time. I remember buckling her in her car seat and putting her in the car, and then being in the car and thinking, everyone's a terrible driver. You're all trying to hit us. No one knows what they're doing. And just like, I don't think that I was like mean to CR, but I think I was like head on a swivel. I don't want to see your eyes off the road for even a second, where you're just so uptight and unable to relax. So if you are a first-time mom, maybe you're this first pregnancy, just know that those sort of almost irrational anxieties and fears and stuff are totally normal. It's funny to me now, having as many kids as I do, and having gone through newborn and taking care of a newborn baby as many times as I have at this point, that it's kind of funny to me to like look back and think to the way that I was then, but those emotions were so real, and the fear and the anxiety and stuff. And what I want to add here is just that I did end up going through what at the time I thought I had postpartum depression, but knowing better now, because at the time they really didn't talk about or differentiate the postpartum depression from postpartum anxiety. And looking back now, I truly believe I had postpartum anxiety, not postpartum depression. But I struggled with that for a number of months, and arguably probably the first year of her life. I dealt with a lot of postpartum anxiety. So maybe that was already reflected there in how I felt in the hospital. I don't know. I don't know if it was what the causation, I don't know what the ties are there, but I've been there, I've been through that experience, and that part of it wasn't fun. However, I absolutely loved being a mom, loved having this baby. And it was so crazy to me because it wasn't something I ever knew. Like, I wasn't sure that I ever even wanted to have kids. Again, I talked about that a little bit in the book, but I didn't even know if I wanted to have kids. So having this baby and loving her so much, and truly it was that realization in those first few days after the hospital that, like, everything that people tell you about how you're going to like love this person more than yourself, and you just don't know. You don't know how are you really going to feel? And for everyone it's different. You know, not everyone feels that way, but this immediate love and bond for this person that I had never met, you know, that was this completely new person, that was this mixture of CR and I. And here she was, like, in the flesh, breathing, and I'm holding her, and you love them so much that it just makes you almost feel crazy. And I remember that so vividly, the feelings of, like, I feel unwell because of how much I love you. I feel like I love you so much that this isn't healthy. And again, all of that ended up contributing to my, like, postpartum anxiety, feeling like I love you too much and God's going to take you away from me because I love you too much. It's not healthy. I'm not allowed to love you this much, so he's going to take you away. My mind went to some dark places after, you know, the first few months of her life. Hopefully this whole time I've been talking, you've seen some really cute pictures of her. So you've seen what a just, oh gosh, what a just precious baby she was. But yeah, that is, in a nutshell, or not a nutshell, in a very long version, Kennedy's birth story. Like I said, she was 5 pounds 9 ounces, 18¼ inches long, and she was, by the grace of God, very, very healthy and robust, if you will, for such a tiny little baby. She was such a little fighter, and she never had to go to the NICU, never had, you know, any issues there. So I was very, very thankful that the steroid shots, you know, that she'd been given previously, and everything had helped and taken care of that. So I was very grateful for that. But yeah, so that is Kennedy's birth story. I am going to do Shelby's because it is a stark contrast to this one. My first birth and my second birth were stark contrasts, which I think is funny because I do talk about sometimes how numbers and dates are kind of something that I feel like God has used at times in my life to confirm things for me, or to reveal things to me. And Kennedy was born on January 10th, so her birthday was 1/10, and Shelby was born on October 1st, and her birthday was 10/1. And Kennedy was born at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and Shelby was born at 2 o'clock in the morning. So they're these, like, exact opposites of each other, and their births were also exact opposites, and they looked opposite of each other. So I will also do Shelby's birth story coming up. I don't know that that'll be the next Untold Stories video, but I will do Shelby's birth story coming up. But that is it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you enjoy the Untold Stories series. If you have any video requests along this series line, like I said, I told you guys in the beginning some of the ideas that you guys had sent me on Instagram, but if you have any other ideas, definitely let me know in the comments. And the battery on my microphone just died, so the audio here is gonna sound really weird, but that's it for today's video, guys. I hope that you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all again very soon. Bye.
Twists and turns in the sun. It beats down and it burns, but I keep on pushing through. And every step quicker than the last, my feet tread down this